I sat frozen at my son's grand dining table as he raised a toast. Not to me, the mother who scraped and sacrificed for decades, but to his wife's mother. The woman who really keeps our family together, he said, while Patricia's pearls caught the chandelier's glow. My chest tightened, but I didn't break. After $15 million in investments, after deeds still inked with my signature, I was being replaced in front of my own blood. By Christmas, he would discover just how dangerous it is to forget whose name is written beneath the foundation of his fortune. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Nora Bennett tightened her grip around the stem of her wine glass as the laughter roared from the end of the table. The dining room in Ethan's newly built Charlotte mansion was cathedral high and polished to sterile perfection. White marble floors, abstract paintings, centerpiece chandeliers that looked more like sculptures than lighting. It was a space built to impress and to distance. At the far end of the long mahogany table, Claire clinked her champagne flute with Patricia's. To the woman who keeps our house running like a Fortune 500 company, Claire beamed. Mom, I don't know what we'd do without you. Patricia Hale smiled, her signature pearl necklace catching the chandelier's glow. It's easy when you care about your family. The word family hung in the air like a slap. Ethan chuckled, wiping his mouth with a linen napkin. Seriously, Mom, Patricia's been a godsend, coordinated the decorator, booked the caterers, helped with Grace's early college stuff, even set up our trust paperwork. He turned to Nora, still smiling but with the same dismissiveness he once reserved for waiters and Uber drivers. You've done enough over the years. It's time for you to rest. You're kind of dead weight now. Silence. Even the forks paused. Claire smirked into her glass. Patricia said nothing, letting the comment settle like sediment. Nora blinked once. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. But she set her wine down with deliberate grace and reached for her cloth napkin. She dabbed at her mouth and folded it precisely, laying it on her plate. I'm glad you have what you need, she said, voice soft, unthreatening. It's important to feel supported. Ethan missed the edge under her calm. Exactly. That's why we've decided to streamline things. Patricia's going to take the lead on family planning, travel, holidays, legacy stuff. Legacy. The word hit harder than she expected. Claire twirled her fork. You're welcome to visit, of course. Just let Patricia know first. She keeps the schedule. Nora inhaled deeply. The roasted duck had gone cold on her plate, but she still took one bite, chewed slowly, and swallowed. She would not leave this table starved, figuratively or otherwise. Across the table, Grace sat rigid, phone flipped upside down beside her salad plate, untouched. She looked older than 17 just then, eyes narrowed, watching her parents with a quiet disgust she hadn't learned from TikTok. When dinner was declared over, Claire chirped about dessert in the sunroom, and Patricia linked arms with Ethan as if she were escorting a groom to his own reception. Grace hung back. As the others filtered out, she reached for Nora's hand beneath the table. I saw everything, she whispered. Nora turned. Grace's voice trembled, not with fear, but with rage on her behalf. They don't get it. They don't see what they're doing. Nora looked at her granddaughter, the only person in the house who hadn't traded their heart for status. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, but steel-lined. They'll see eventually. Grace tightened her grip. I'm recording everything. Nora's eyes flickered, not with surprise, but approval. Good girl. In the hallway, Claire called out, Grace, come say goodnight to Nana Patricia. Grace rolled her eyes so hard Nora nearly laughed. As they rose, Nora caught one last glimpse of Patricia through the glass-paned doors, standing at the head of the sunroom like she belonged there, smiling, waving off Claire's compliments as if modesty were her sport. Nora's reflection in the mirror by the entryway looked small, aged, unimportant. But inside, a storm was already forming. As the heavy front door closed behind her, the night air was cold and still. Christmas lights flickered from a dozen manicured lawns, twinkling like a mockery. She stood there a moment longer than necessary, the humiliation still warm on her skin. Then she pulled out her keys with calm precision, walked to her car, and drove off without a word. Eyes fixed forward, mind already sharpening like a blade. Nora's bungalow felt smaller than usual that night. but also safer. Like walking into a childhood bedroom after a storm. Familiar, still, real. She slid her shoes off with slow control, then walked to the narrow hallway closet and pulled down a nondescript fireproof lockbox. No blinking lights, no keypad, just weight, literal and metaphorical. At the kitchen table, under the dim warmth of a vintage pendant light, she opened it. Stacks of manila folders, handwritten ledgers in her clean, looping script, a few yellowing copies of old deeds, some stamped, others not. The smell of paper and ink, the scent of her real legacy. She pulled out one folder marked Ethan-LLC Startup. She didn't cry, didn't wince, just read. $230,000 transferred over a span of 4 years. She'd written checks from her pension, cashed out a CD early, even sold her wedding ring after his second failed pitch deck. All for a shot at the future, he said. Back then, he still called her Mama when he asked. She flipped to the deed file. Lot 17A in Southwest Charlotte, titled jointly in their names. For estate efficiency, Ethan had said when he begged her to sign. Nora's finger tapped the page once, slow, joint title. He couldn't have sold it without her, even now. The door creaked open behind her. Linda Watkins didn't knock. She never had. I saw your porch light, she said, shrugging out of her coat like she lived there. Figured you needed a voice of reason, or whiskey. Nora gestured to the second chair. Both. Linda sat down and caught sight of the document. Her eyes narrowed. Well, he's sitting on your land like a crowned prince? Nora nodded. And still owes me over 200 grand from his so-called bootstrap phase. Linda snorted. That money's still leverage. It's a rope. He just doesn't know he's tangled in it. Nora smiled without warmth. If they erased me at the table, I'll erase them on paper. Linda's grin stretched. Now that's my girl. She reached into her purse, pulled out a worn leather-bound notebook, and flipped it open. Want my real estate lawyer's contact? Harold Jacobs. Cleanest contracts I've ever seen. Doesn't blink, doesn't chat, just wins. Nora took the number, her fingers already moving toward her cell. Tomorrow, she said. Before they realize anything's shifted, Linda raised her glass. To legal knives sharper than Patricia's cheekbones. They clinked. A buzz broke the silence. Nora's phone lit up with a message from Grace. Grace, thought you'd want to see what they're posting. Screenshots incoming. Seconds later, image after image flooded the screen. Claire on Instagram stories, laughing with Patricia over wine. She's sweet, but seriously. We had to put the old lady out to pasture. Christmas is for the real family now. Another story captioned, some people don't know when to step aside. Patricia stepped up. That's what real women do. Nora stared. She'd spent decades folding lunch money into Ethan's backpacks, sat through his night terrors, soccer games, teen tantrums, paid rent when he missed it, celebrated when he got his first real funding check. She'd stayed in the background, not out of weakness, but to let him feel taller. And now she was a punchline in a glass-walled mansion, edited out of her own life. Her phone buzzed again. Grace, if they only knew what you're holding. Nora stood, walked to the hallway mirror. The same reflection, small, wrinkled, gray. But now, something new behind the eyes. Calculation. Calm. She whispered, almost to herself, let's see how Patricia likes being erased. The law office smelled like money. Not new money, not Ethan's kind, but the kind that lived in legacy trust funds and bound leather. The receptionist offered Nora cucumber water. She declined. Harold Jacobs's office was wall-to-wall mahogany. He rose. When she entered, a lean man in his 60s with sharp eyes, silver temples, and a voice that didn't believe in wasting words. I've reviewed the documents Linda sent, he said, motioning to the chair across from his desk. You have full co-ownership. And the startup funds? Not a gift, not in writing, which means we have leverage. I want it clean, Nora said, setting her purse down. Quiet. No warning until it's irreversible. Harold nodded once and slid a folder toward her. Foreclosure action. This starts the clock. She read every line. Decades of balancing public school budgets had left her with a talent for finding traps buried in contracts. There were none. File it, she said, and draft a revised will while you're at it. Grace gets everything. Harold raised a brow but didn't comment. He opened a drawer and pulled out a clean draft, already prepped. 2 days later, Linda stood in Nora's kitchen, glasses on the tip of her nose, rubber stamp in hand. Ready? Nora signed her name in firm, even strokes. Linda pressed the notary seal into the thick paper. Thunk. Well, she said, smiling as she handed it back, I do believe you just changed the future. Nora didn't smile. That was always the point. She had no interest in announcing her next steps. Not to Ethan, not to Claire, certainly not to Patricia. She moved in silence, calculated, surgical. By the end of the week, she'd scheduled quiet meetings with 2 local developers, each more curious than the last. Once they saw who co-owned the land Ethan thought was his kingdom, she met them in neutral spots: a booth at a quiet diner, a corner table in a downtown wine bar. No paper trail, no digital footprint. Meanwhile, across town, Ethan and Claire were filming their new car deliveries like teenagers on prom night. Grace sent Nora a video, Claire twirling beside a jet-black Maserati, while Ethan revved the engine of a Bentley SUV. New toys for the new money kings, Grace captioned. He paid for this with a second mortgage, she added in another message. On the house built on your land. Nora shook her head. Not in disbelief, but in confirmation. They'd built a glass castle and set it on her stone. Saturday morning brought blue skies, frost on the grass, and the unmistakable screech of Patricia Hale's voice coming from an Instagram story. Welcome to our Ladies Who Lead brunch, she chirped from the back patio, camera panning across a sea of pastel dresses and mimosas. Empowered women empower families, am I right? Claire appeared beside her with a flourish, holding up a framed photo of Patricia and Ethan at a gala. The woman who raised my hero. The applause was polite, Claire's forced laughter less so. Nora didn't watch the whole video. She was too busy reviewing buyer contracts Harold had sent over. 2 offers already on the table. Both above market. Both eager to close before the new year. In her inbox, an alert from her bank. Harold had initiated title clearance paperwork. The foreclosure notice would be filed by Tuesday. On Sunday, Nora did something she hadn't done in years. She baked. Not out of nostalgia, but ritual, control, precision. The dough had to be cold. The butter had to be salted. The crust had to snap. Grace showed up just before the timer dinged, carrying a laptop and wearing that same half-smirk Nora now knew meant trouble for someone else. They're at church, she said, dropping into a chair. Patricia's giving a speech at the women's ministry. Wants to mentor displaced mothers. Nora's lip twitched, just barely. I printed you something, Grace added, pulling a document from her backpack and sliding it across the table. It was a quote Claire had tweeted 2 years ago. Never forget, the power of removal is in your hands. Toxic family is still toxic. Grace had crossed out toxic and written underneath in red Sharpie, entitled. Nora read it twice, then looked at her granddaughter who was now pouring coffee, like she'd done it for 100 Christmases. You're sure you're ready for all this? Nora asked quietly. Grace met her eyes. They erased the wrong woman. The listing agreement lay flat on the table, warm sunlight streaking across the parchment as if blessing it. Nora signed her name in bold, deliberate strokes, not with rage, but with something colder, resolve. Across from her, the buyer's agent smiled, professional and polished. We're good to go. He's ready to expedite closing if your co-owner doesn't raise objection. Nora returned the smile just slightly. He won't. Not until it's too late. The agent chuckled politely, unaware of the fire under her tone. We'll begin title processing today. By the time the front door clicked shut behind him, Nora had already texted Harold. Signed. Let's move. She stood by the window, watching her wind chimes sway gently in the crisp Carolina breeze. Grace was due over soon. They had plans, not to celebrate, but to observe. And when Grace observed, her camera always followed. By noon, Nora's old Subaru crawled into the familiar circular driveway of Ethan's estate. Claire's Maserati glinted in the sun like it belonged in a car ad. Patricia's Lexus was parked crookedly, front tire pressing into the lawn. Nora stepped out slowly, smoothing her sweater. Grace, filming discreetly from across the street, gave her a small nod. Inside, the laughter was as shrill as ever. Nora followed the sound toward the back patio. Patricia stood near the outdoor fireplace, swirling her wine and holding court to a cluster of women dressed in the uniform of old Southern money. Blazers over leggings, gold accents, and inherited arrogance. As Nora approached, the air shifted. Well, look what the cat dragged in, Patricia said, just loud enough. Nora said nothing. Claire appeared from the kitchen with a tray of crostini and glanced sideways. Surprised to see you out of that cozy little shoebox you live in. Patricia chuckled. You know, it's admirable, in a way, keeping things small. Low ceilings, low taxes, low impact. The women around her tittered, unsure if they were supposed to. Nora tilted her head, eyes calm. Yes, and yet, the small woman still holds your floor. Patricia's smile faltered, just briefly. You're selling, aren't you? She asked, eyes narrowing. I heard rumors, but surely you wouldn't be so reckless. That land is part of Ethan's future. His name isn't on my contract, Nora replied, and what I do with what's mine isn't up for brunch discussion. Claire stepped forward, arms folded. You'd jeopardize your own son's security just to prove a point? Nora turned toward her slowly. You erased me from your family. I'm simply confirming the edit. A soft buzz. Grace, across the patio, held up her phone just slightly, recording Patricia's flushed face, Claire's tight jaw. Ethan stepped outside with a half-eaten sandwich, blinking against the sun. What's going on? Your mother, Patricia snapped, has decided to sell half your land to strangers, out of spite. Ethan turned to Nora. Is that true? She looked at him for a long moment, as if taking inventory of the boy she'd once raised, the man he'd become, and the debt that could never be repaid. Yes, she said simply. He sighed, shrugged once like she'd just told him he forgot to take the trash out. Whatever, Mom. You want to live in your feelings? Go ahead. Just don't expect us to come rescue you later. Patricia smirked. Grace lowered her phone. He really doesn't get it. No, Nora replied. He won't. Not until the papers are filed. That afternoon, Harold's voice crackled over speakerphone in Nora's kitchen. Buyers setting a hard closing window, December 22nd. If Ethan doesn't buy you out by then, we go public and proceed. Perfect, Nora said, slicing into a blood orange. Let's give them something to unwrap. Nora was slicing apples when the knock came. Hard, sharp, impatient. Then came the voice. Mom, open the damn door. She wiped her hands, calmly folded the kitchen towel, and walked to the front entrance of her quiet bungalow. Through the peephole, she saw Ethan pacing on the porch like a man who'd just had the wind knocked out of him. She didn't flinch, just opened the door. Slow and even. What a surprise, she said, stepping aside. Come in, Ethan. He barreled past her, his jaw clenched, hair messy like he'd run a hand through it 100 times on the drive over. You can't do this. You can't sell the land, our land, from under us. Nora shut the door behind him. Not our land, Ethan. My land. You only remembered it existed when it was time to build your kingdom on top of it. He turned on her, eyes wide. Do you have any idea what you've just done? Nora moved past him, walked into the kitchen, and laid a thick manila envelope on the table. The deed, the contracts, the title transfer in motion. She tapped it once. I know exactly what I've done. Ethan stared at it like it was a grenade with the pin pulled. Harold Jacobs, Nora added calmly, filed the paperwork 3 days ago. Buyers in escrow. You have until the 22nd. His voice rose. You blindsided me. No, she said, turning to face him fully. You dismissed me. There's a difference. The screen door creaked open behind them. Claire's heels clicked angrily against the tile before her voice cut the air like glass. Are you kidding me, Ethan? You didn't check the title? You didn't know she could sell? I thought it was locked in, he shouted back, flustered. I thought the LLC owned everything. Claire turned on him, her rage no longer dressed in pearls. You let your mother hold the deed to our house? What else did you miss? Did you give her the garage code too? Nora said nothing. She didn't have to. The silence, thick and deliberate, was its own kind of power. I gave you everything, Ethan snarled. A better life, private schools for Grace, a future. Nora raised an eyebrow. You gave me exile, and I paid for your future long before Claire picked out your suits. Claire's cheeks flamed. You bitter... A new voice cut through the doorway. Harold Jacobs stepped inside, suit crisp, expression unreadable. Apologies for the intrusion. Nora asked me to deliver hard copies in person. Ethan whirled. She can't do this. Harold's voice was quiet, precise. She can, and she already has. Her title ownership is legally documented, Foreclosure rights, contract authority, co-signed development leverage, all valid. He handed Nora the envelope. Claire let out a strangled sound and slammed her purse onto the table. This is a PR nightmare. If this leaks... Oh, it's leaking, Nora said, finally taking a seat. Buyers have agents. Agents have network. People talk. And when they find out your house sits on contested ground, no one's going to want your party invites, Claire. Patricia appeared in the doorway then, lips pinched, clutching her phone like it had betrayed her. Is this true? She asked Ethan, voice brittle. You let her keep legal control of the land? Do you have any idea what this will do to our image? Nora gave her a cool look. Your image is made of glass. I'm just adjusting the sunlight. Patricia turned, as if searching for allies that no longer existed. Her polished demeanor cracked under pressure, the smile now stiff, forced. This isn't over, she said tightly. Nora leaned forward. It never even started, Patricia. You thought I was retired. Turns out I was just reloading. Ethan stared at her, not furious anymore, just stunned, as if he'd seen her for the first time. Outside, Grace waited in the car, camera already rolling. From her window she could see them through the living room blinds, 3 frantic figures, one unmoving. She pressed record anyway. Harold's voice was calm, but there was something almost amused hiding under it. I ran a broader asset check like you asked, he said over the phone. The vacation loan? Remember that luxury property in Asheville your son couldn't quite qualify for 2 years ago? Nora stood at her kitchen window, one hand on the curtain. He called me at midnight, said it was a temporary thing, just needed me to co-sign for creditworthiness. Well, Harold said, you're not just a co-signer, you're a co-owner on paper. And guess what that gives you? Nora smiled faintly. Foreclosure rights. Correct. If they default or miss a payment, you have legal authority to initiate a lien or force a sale. The Christmas lights on Ethan's roofline flickered in her mind. All white, sterile, too perfect, like Claire had ordered them from a catalog labeled Tasteful Wealth Trademark. Send the paperwork, she said. Let's prep for phase 2. Across town, Ethan paced his sleek home office like a caged executive with nowhere left to promote himself. Claire sat stiffly on the couch, her phone glowing in her lap. Her fingers tapped mindlessly, then stopped. She's bluffing, Ethan muttered. She's not, Claire snapped. Jacobs isn't some neighborhood notary. He's surgical. If he's filing, she's already locked something down. She wouldn't go that far. I mean, she's my mother. Claire turned slowly, her tone too calm. The mother you let Patricia erase? Ethan stiffened. Claire pressed. You thought just because you built a new life, the old one stopped existing. Newsflash. Your mom knows more about contracts than you ever did. She wouldn't take the house from us, he said again, quieter this time, like a prayer. Patricia walked in, heels clicking over polished oak. And yet, she said, holding out her phone, here we are. She flipped the screen toward them. A new post on a local Charlotte gossip board. Real estate shakeup in Myers Park. Tech couple's property now under disputed title. Luxury home. Foreclosure threat rumored. Holiday disaster incoming. Claire went pale. Ethan reached out as if the screen had physically punched him. What the hell? She's drawing blood, Patricia snapped. She's not bluffing. She's declaring war. Later that day, Nora and Grace sat on the living room floor with a shoebox of old photos and fresh gingerbread cookies between them. Nora flipped through pictures. Ethan in Cub Scouts, Grace in a secondhand princess costume, Linda holding up a sold sign in front of her first house. You know, Grace said, scrolling through her phone, Patricia is still bragging. Look. She turned the phone toward Nora. A recent post. Patricia at the Asheville vacation property, posing beside a hot tub in a fur-lined robe with the caption, When you own it all, December hits different. Nora raised an eyebrow. Own, does she? Grace grinned. Not for long. A voice called from the kitchen. I brought cider and a pen. Linda strode in with a legal pad and Harold's courier packet. Ready to file? Nora opened the folder. Let's give her something different to post about. Linda stamped her signature on the lien documents with dramatic flair. She won't brag long. On Monday morning, Patricia arrived at the Asheville property for a photo shoot with her faux influencer brunch group. She smiled, posed in the snow-dusted gazebo, held her mug of peppermint cocoa just right. Then her phone buzzed. Then again. Then a third time. She froze, lips parting as she read the message from her assistant. Urgent. Leon filed on property. Media request pending. Do you want to issue a statement? Patricia's cocoa spilled down the front of her robe. Meanwhile, at Nora's bungalow, the wind picked up and shook the chimes on her porch. Grace handed her the notarized copy. The paper felt heavier than it should have, as if it carried not just a lien, but a legacy reclaimed. Nora folded it and slid it into her fireproof box. 2 roofs, she said. Let's see how they like the winter without either one. The courtroom was quiet, not with respect, but tension. The kind of silence that comes right before something humiliating happens. Claire sat at the petitioner's table, lips pressed tight. Wearing a navy blazer she thought made her look responsible. Patricia was in the gallery behind her, polished but visibly strained, fingers twitching at her phone screen as if willing someone to delete the gossip blogs. Across the aisle, Nora sat between Harold and Grace. No jewelry, no dramatic outfit, just a charcoal gray sweater, her hair in a simple twist, reading glasses perched low. She looked every bit the harmless grandmother they were about to accuse of cognitive decline, but her eyes didn't match the costume. They were sharp. Judge Coleman adjusted his glasses as he looked through the file. Let me make sure I understand. Ms. Claire Bennett, you're petitioning the court for emergency guardianship over your mother-in-law, citing alleged senility, erratic financial behavior, and, he paused, frowning, psychological distress? Yes, Your Honor, Claire said, standing. We're deeply concerned. Nora has recently made confusing decisions that could endanger her well-being and the legacy of our family. You mean the property she co-owns and has legal right to sell? The judge asked, deadpan. Claire's mouth opened, then closed. We believe she's being manipulated. By whom? Claire hesitated. She's isolating herself, working with people who don't have her best interests in mind. It's not normal. From the gallery, Patricia added loudly. She talks to herself. It's sad. Thank you, Judge Coleman said coolly. But unless you're under oath, Ms. Hale, you'll refrain. Harold stood. Your Honor, we have documents to submit. Medical records from Nora's primary physician, full cognitive evaluation completed last month, including memory, judgment, and reasoning assessments. All came back flawless. We also have 3 notarized statements from neighbors, bank officials, and her legal counsel, myself, attesting to her lucidity and independence. He handed a thick folder to the bailiff, and, just for context, we've attached her spreadsheet tracking her son's loan interest over 14 years. She corrected 2 decimal errors I made. Judge Coleman arched a brow. Impressive. Grace cleared her throat, rising slowly from her seat. I'd also like to testify, Your Honor. He looked at her. You're? Grace Bennett, Nora's granddaughter. He nodded. Proceed. Grace stepped forward, pulled a small USB from her coat pocket, and handed it to the clerk. These are screen recordings from Patricia Hale's social media, posted within the last month. Captions and commentary mocking Nora. Several refer to her as a washed-up old bat, and one even jokes that we should just stick her in a rocking chair and unplug the Wi-Fi. Claire's head whipped around to glare at Patricia. That was taken out of context, Patricia hissed. Grace didn't blink. There are 9 posts, same context. The courtroom monitors blinked to life. On screen, Patricia sipping a mimosa at brunch, saying into the camera, "Some people just get sad and spiteful when their time is up. Let them rant. It won't matter once we've got it all tied up legally." The sound in the courtroom dropped to 0. Claire looked down at her shoes. Judge Coleman tapped his pen once, then again. Is there any evidence Nora Bennett is cognitively impaired? He asked, looking directly at Claire. No, Your Honor, she muttered. He turned to Nora. Would you like to respond? Nora stood slowly, calm, controlled. They tried to write me off, she said. I wrote back. She sat down without another word. The judge leaned back in his chair. This petition is not just legally frivolous. It's personally insulting. I'm denying it with prejudice. And if I see another attempt like this without actual evidence, I'll consider sanctions for abuse of process. Claire slumped. Patricia stared straight ahead, blinking like her contacts were on fire. Court is adjourned, Judge Coleman snapped. The gavel hit wood, but the real crack had already happened. The illusion of control shattered. As they stood to leave, Nora turned back for a moment, locking eyes with Patricia in the gallery. Patricia's glare was ice. Nora's look wasn't smug. It was finished. Charlotte Post. Tech family's holiday nightmare. Foreclosure looms over $4 million estate. Aerial photos of Ethan and Claire's mansion appeared beneath the headline. Glossy shots lifted from Zillow and Google Earth, paired with court documents that had recently become public record. Below that, the byline, filed jointly by Bennett matriarch, closing expected before Christmas. Nora didn't need to read the full article. She already knew what it said. Every quote, every timestamp, every shade of their downfall. Still, it was Grace who read it out loud, sitting barefoot on Nora's couch, mug of cocoa in one hand, her phone in the other. They even used the phrase, family betrayal, she said with a grin. I didn't know newspapers were allowed to be that honest. Nora stirred her tea. Truth always prints clean. At the same moment across town, Patricia Hale's stilettos echoed across the polished floors of the Glen Haven Country Club. She had worn emerald, sharp, expensive, unforgiving. But there was no jewel that could hide a bruised reputation. She paused outside the lounge, hearing the whispers before the doors even opened. Did you see the article? $4 million, and she still couldn't keep the deed. I heard the mother-in-law is the one who funded the whole thing years ago. Wild. She entered with a tight smile, but the silence that followed was louder than any greeting. One of the other board wives looked up from her scone and said without irony, Patricia, we were just talking about boundaries. Patricia's hand clenched around her clutch. It's temporary, she said stiffly. We're correcting it privately. No one answered. At Miller's Market, a few aisles away from the bakery counter, Nora picked up a bag of pecans when she heard it. The screech of a cart being shoved too fast. Claire, hair frizzed, sunglasses askew, lips painted too red for 9 a.m. You smug, conniving. Claire's voice cracked as she stormed across the aisle. A few shoppers paused. 2 more instinctively raised their phones. You think you've won? You think you can just erase us from everything? Nora didn't move, didn't raise her voice, just stood beside a pyramid of sweet potatoes, hands still on her cart. I didn't erase you, she said. You did that when you mistook silence for surrender. Claire's hands shook. We had a life. We built it from scratch. No, Nora said softly. You built it on a loan you never paid back, and a lie you thought would stay buried. Someone 2 rows over muttered. Damn. Claire stepped forward again, jaw tight. I hate you. A young woman with a toddler stepped between them, firm but polite. Ma'am, you need to back up, Claire scoffed. Mind your business. I am, the woman replied. This store's my business, and you're losing it. Claire fled down the aisle seconds later, heels clacking like a broken metronome. Behind her, whispers followed. Phones were still filming. By that evening, the video had hit 2.3 million views. The title, MIL Fights, entitled DIL at Grocery Store, Grandma for President. Top comment, that Nora lady is pure class, and sharp as a tack. I want her writing the laws. Another, imagine trying to get someone declared senile, then getting slapped down by a judge and a bag of sweet potatoes. Claire had turned her comments off. Patricia had posted nothing in 48 hours, a lifetime in influencer time. That night, Grace curled up next to Nora on the couch, their faces lit by the soft white glow of the Christmas tree and the flicker of Nora's phone screen. They all see it now, Grace whispered. Nora didn't answer immediately. She reached over, brushed a crumb from Grace's hoodie. Truth has a way of surfacing when you stop pushing it down, she said. Linda arrived just past 9, kicking snow off her boots. She dropped a printout of the latest article onto the coffee table. Foreclosure matriarch breaks internet, dignity, deeds, and a Christmas deadline. She plopped onto the armchair, grinning. Public opinion is the best seasoning, even better than cinnamon, Nora murmured. The street was lined in warm white lights, each one wrapped tightly around the trees like tinsel around tension. From her parked car 2 houses down, Nora watched Ethan's roof glitter under flood-lit perfection. Claire had insisted on a lighting crew this year. Across the lawn, a plastic reindeer collapsed under its own weight. A metaphor in motion, if ever Nora had seen one. Grace sat beside her in the passenger seat, camera balanced on her knee, already recording. Do you want me to go in with you? She asked. Nora shook her head. They need to see exactly who's delivering the final candle on their Advent wreath. She opened the door and stepped into the cold, her boots crunching over lightly salted concrete. As she neared the front porch, Ethan opened the door, red-faced, unshaven, eyes sunken with something close to dread. "Mom," he breathed, "please, don't do this. It's Christmas." Nora stepped under the string of lights above the doorframe. "Christmas doesn't erase consequences, Ethan. We were going to host tomorrow," he said, voice breaking. "Grace's friends, carolers. I had a caterer booked." "You had a mother too," she replied, gaze steady. "And you replaced her." Behind Ethan, Claire hovered in the foyer, mascara already streaked. "This is cruel," she said. "You're ruining your own family." Nora looked at her, unflinching. "Family isn't built on fraud and brunches." From the kitchen, Patricia's voice carried, low, clipped, furious. "We should have bought her out when we had the chance." Nora turned toward the window and spotted her through the reflection, arms crossed, wine glass trembling. Patricia didn't move toward the door. She never did like to stand too close to the fallout. "Did you come here just to twist the knife?" Ethan asked, voice rising. "No," Nora said, opening her coat slowly. From the inside pocket, she pulled a thick white envelope. "This is notice of completion. The buyer wired funds this morning. It's final. The land transfers by end of day." Ethan's hands dropped to his sides. Claire let out a ragged sob and covered her mouth. Behind her, a motion sensor Christmas angel flickered, wings glitching, stuttering between light and shadow. "You won't even give us time to move?" Ethan asked, quieter now. "What about Grace?" Nora stepped closer. "Grace knows the truth. She's not confused about who she comes from." On the curb, Grace kept the camera steady. Through the windshield, her hands were calm, composed, like Nora had taught her. Inside the house, Patricia finally stepped into view, one heel clicking forward. "This won't age well for you," she said, glass still in hand. "Everyone has their moment. Yours is bitter." Nora looked at her, eyes steady. "And yours is finished." She turned to Ethan one last time. "I gave you everything," she said. "Patricia gave you decor." Nora tucked the envelope into his shaking hands and stepped back into the cold. Claire collapsed onto the entryway bench, sobbing into her fur-lined sleeve. Patricia muttered something no one could quite hear. Ethan stood motionless on the porch as Nora walked down the path she helped fund, one stone at a time, years ago, when she still thought giving was enough. Back in the car, Grace reached across the center console and pressed stop on the recording. Nora fastened her seatbelt. "Get a good angle?" "Every second," Grace whispered. They sat in silence for a few breaths, the lights from Ethan's house pulsing like a haunted stage. Nora didn't need to look back to know the curtain had fallen. It started at 7:46 a.m., just as Patricia Hale's coffee finished brewing. There were no sirens, no shouting. Just 3 black SUVs pulling up outside her brick colonial, their tires crunching over the frost-bitten lawn, with the finality of a closing argument. She opened the door in her silk robe, perfectly knotted, pearl studs still in place from the night before. "Ms. Hale?" the lead investigator said, holding up his badge. "We have a federal warrant to search the premises for documentation related to fraudulent lending activity, undisclosed income, and false ownership claims involving private trusts." Behind him, 2 agents moved past her, polite, efficient, wearing gloves. "This is a mistake," Patricia said, eyes wide. "A very expensive mistake." Another agent entered the house, collecting phones, laptops, file boxes. One of them gently moved a crystal bowl of ornaments off the credenza to reach a folder labeled Bennett Holdings. Claire was already crying by the time she came down the stairs. "What is this?" she asked, voice cracking. "Mom, what's going on?" Patricia tried to maintain posture, chin lifted even as her hands trembled. "Don't panic," she whispered. "They're bluffing. This is performative. No one's been charged." "They don't bring vans for performative," Claire shot back. From the dining room, one agent called out, "We've got discrepancies in the asset transfer logs. This matches the foreclosure documentation tied to the Asheville lien." Patricia's composure finally broke. "Those are my files. You can't just—" The lead agent handed her another form. "Actually, we can." Claire slid down onto the last step, clutching the banister like it might keep her life from tilting further. Ethan arrived half an hour later, jaw locked, coat unzipped, fury radiating from his pores. He barely acknowledged the officer, just stormed past them, straight to Patricia. "You said this wouldn't touch us," he hissed. "You said it was all shielded under the foundation." Patricia didn't answer. She couldn't. She was too busy watching two agents carry out a silver briefcase she'd kept behind a false panel in her closet, the one that held her private asset note, a duplicate phone, and a flash drive labeled "For Leverage Only." Across town, the sky over Nora's bungalow was a gentle gray, thick with the scent of snow not yet fallen. She sat on her porch in a thick cardigan, teacup steaming in her hand, the world peaceful around her. Grace was scrolling on her phone beside her, one leg tucked under the other. "They're unraveling," she said, not even bothering to hide the smirk. Nora didn't look up. "We all come undone eventually. Some of us just choose the thread." Grace turned the phone to her. The local news stream showed live footage of Patricia's front door, agents moving in and out. Headlines scrolled across the bottom. "Breaking: Influencer and real estate advisor under investigation. Luxury Holdings seized multiple complaints linked to falsified lending partnerships." Nora took another sip of tea. Linda arrived 5 minutes later, holding 2 reusable bags and a pint of eggnog. She stepped onto the porch with a grin. "They've got a camera in Patricia's front yard. CNN's sharing the live feed. It's practically a Christmas special." Grace snorted. Linda dropped the bags. "I brought cinnamon rolls and copies of the original deed filings, just in case anyone tries to rewrite history." "You didn't have to," Nora said gently. Linda eased into the rocking chair next to her. "You're right. I didn't." She looked over. "All you did was hold the pen." From across the street, a group of kids were hanging lights under their dad's direction, laughter floating over the porch like music. Nora watched them for a long moment, eyes soft. "Funny," she said. "This is the first Christmas in years I haven't felt small." Grace leaned her head on her grandmother's shoulder. Inside Nora's phone, notifications pinged like clockwork. A voicemail from a local radio station, a comment from a journalist requesting a statement, a message from someone Nora hadn't spoken to in 20 years, simply reading, "You were right." She didn't answer any of them. Not yet. The knock came at 8:03 a.m. Firm, measured, official. Claire jolted upright from the couch, still in her robe, mascara smudged from sleep and panic. Ethan, half-dressed in yesterday's wrinkled shirt, froze as the second knock echoed louder through the marble foyer. When he opened the door, 2 deputies stood there in crisp uniforms, holding a thick envelope sealed with legal certainty. "Mr. Bennett?" one asked. "Yes," Ethan said, already knowing what came next. The deputy held out the document. "Notice of eviction, effective immediately. Filed and approved as part of the foreclosure closing dated December 22nd. You've been granted 72 hours to vacate." Claire rushed forward. "Wait, what? Number. You can't do this. You can't throw us out before Christmas." She looked at the men like they were malfunctioning robots, like this wasn't real life. Her voice cracked. "There are decorations on the roof. I still have wrapped gifts under the tree." The deputy didn't flinch. "Ma'am, this order is enforceable today. We suggest you begin making arrangements." Claire's sob exploded out of her like a gut punch. "This isn't happening. This isn't happening." From across the street, Grace stood on the curb with her phone tucked away for once. She didn't need to record this. It was already written in the fabric of the moment. Nora stood beside her, silent, gloved hands folded in front of her coat. She watched the scene unfold with the calm of someone who had cried every necessary tear long ago. Ethan stepped out onto the porch and crossed to them. His voice was low. "Mom, please." Nora didn't respond. He looked at Grace, then back at Nora. "There are kids inside. Staff. Claire's parents were going to visit. We had Christmas planned. Couldn't you wait until after?" She met his eyes. "You mean, like how you waited to tell me I was being replaced?" He swallowed hard. This is different." "No," she said. "It's exactly the same. You chose someone else. You erased me. Now you're seeing what it feels like to be written out." Claire wailed behind him, shrill, uncontrolled, as movers from a contracted team began pulling into the driveway behind the deputies. 2 men in matching shirts stepped out and walked toward the door with calm purpose. "This is a home," Ethan said. "It's not just walls and floors. It's where Grace grew up, where we planned our future." "Grace will be fine," Nora said. "She already knows how to survive an empty room. The rest of you will learn." The movers passed them on the porch. Claire screamed something incoherent from inside, a glass shattering a second later. Ethan looked down. I never meant for it to get this far. You mean, you never expected me to fight back? Nora replied. You were counting on the same silence I gave you at that dinner table. Grace stepped closer, her voice soft but sure. You were counting on her being too hurt to defend herself. Ethan turned to her. Sweetheart. She cut him off with a look. Don't. You had your chances. Inside, boxes were already being opened, decorations were being removed, an inflatable snowman, still fully puffed with air, was folded unceremoniously into a black contractor bag. No sign of Patricia. She was too busy with her lawyer, or her bail hearing, or perhaps just avoiding being seen when the ship she'd built from stolen lumber finally sank. Claire collapsed on the staircase, head in her hands, sobbing against the mahogany railing. Ethan stood on the porch like a man watching his name be deleted from a lease he never understood. Nora took one last look at the house she had funded and been banished from. Then she turned, slowly, and walked back toward the car. Grace followed. No words, no victory speech, just the cold wind and the sound of a Christmas empire being carefully packed into cardboard. Christmas Eve came quiet in Charlotte. The snowfall arrived gently, dusting the rooftops like someone trying to cover a wound with lace. Inside Nora's bungalow, the heat purred softly through the vents, and a candle flickered on the kitchen table. Cinnamon, Grace's favorite. The clock read 8:02 p.m. when the knock came. This time, it wasn't angry. It didn't pound. It asked. Grace looked up from her laptop on the couch, brows furrowing. Nora, sitting by the fireplace, didn't move. The knock came again. Softer. 3 beats. Like someone trying not to be heard. I'll get it, Grace said, standing. Nora's voice stopped her. Number, let him knock once more. He did. And then she stood, calmly, quietly, and walked to the front door. When she opened it, Ethan stood on the porch with no coat, no pride, and no plan. He looked thinner, not in body, but spirit, like someone whose identity had been peeled away. Snow clung to his hair. His eyes were red. His voice broke before it started. I have nowhere else to go, he said. Nora said nothing. I didn't come for money, or for Claire. He rushed. She's with her parents. Patricia's. I don't even know where she is. The media's camped out. The accounts are frozen. I don't even have access to my own business line anymore. Still, she said nothing. Then he did the one thing Nora never thought she'd see. He dropped to his knees, on her front porch, in the snow, on Christmas Eve. I didn't know, he said, looking up at her like a boy again. I didn't know how much I'd let them warp me. Inside, Grace stepped to the doorway but didn't cross it. She watched, arms folded over her chest, heart pulled in every direction at once. Ethan's voice trembled. Patricia told me you were slipping, that you didn't understand the world anymore, that your savings were unstable, that you wanted to hand things over. Nora blinked once, then again. And Claire, he continued, she used to show me screenshots of your texts and laugh, said you were lonely, that you were desperate to matter. She said if we kept you close, you'd just slow us down. Nora exhaled through her nose, the air fogged between them. You believed her, she said flatly. Ethan didn't argue. I wanted to believe both of them, he said, because it was easier than believing I'd betrayed the one person who gave me everything. Still on his knees, in the snow. No ring, no watch, no mask left to wear. I'm ruined, he whispered, and I deserve it. Grace shifted her weight at the threshold. Her mother's voice, the screams, the tantrum, they all seemed like echoes now. But this was different. Her father looked like someone who'd finally run out of delusions. Nora stepped forward, closer. The wind kicked up behind her coat, but she stood rooted. I warned you, she said quietly. The day you sat at that table and called me dead weight. He nodded, slowly, snow melting into his collar. You erased me, she said. So I rewrote the ending. She didn't offer him her hand. She didn't invite him inside. Instead, she stepped back, just far enough for the door to begin closing. Grace didn't stop her. Ethan's shoulders crumpled as the door clicked shut behind her. Not slammed, just shut, like something finalized. Inside, Nora walked back to the fireplace. Her tea was still warm. She took a slow sip. Grace sat beside her, knees tucked up under a quilt. Neither spoke. There was nothing left to say. The morning after Christmas, Nora stepped into the courthouse wearing a black wool coat, her hair pinned back into a low knot. She looked neither vengeful nor victorious, just composed, like a woman who came to finish something that should have ended years ago. Harold Jacobs waited at the security checkpoint, briefcase in hand. "Everything's ready," he said, motioning toward the second floor. "Signatures, orders, fund transfer confirmation. After today, there's nothing left for them to contest." "I'm not here to contest," Nora replied. "I'm here to close." They entered the courtroom silently. No judge today, just clerks, document, and the final pieces of a broken empire being logged and locked. Nora sat at the witness desk and signed the last of the papers. First, the restraining order against Ethan, quietly filed, quietly granted. No dramatics, just a piece of paper that said, "You've lost access, permanently." Then, the transfer of her liquidated land sale profits into a protected, irrevocable trust. Sole beneficiary, Grace Bennett. Harold slid the final folder across the table. "And here's the charitable disbursement form. Once you initial, the scholarship fund is launched." Nora's eyes scanned the document. Charlotte Roots Foundation, educational endowment for single mothers and financially discarded women. Underneath, the first donation amount, $750,000. She picked up the pen and signed. Outside, just past the courthouse steps, a woman screamed, "Claire!" Phone in one hand, court-issued folder in the other. Her sobs echoed between the stone columns like some Shakespearean monologue of entitlement unraveling. "She can't do this," Claire shrieked. "This is our future, our money. She's rewriting everything. This isn't legal. Harold, get me Harold." Someone nearby began filming. A man in a blue windbreaker said, "Ma'am, you're on public property. You think I care?" Claire spun toward the camera, hair wild, voice splintering. "She's taking everything. She's giving it away to strangers. Strangers who didn't raise Ethan, who didn't build anything." Then, mid-rant, she slipped on a patch of ice and landed with a slap on the stone steps. The camera didn't flinch. Inside, Nora glanced out the window but didn't smile. There was no satisfaction in watching someone fall, only truth in watching them land. Harold exhaled. "Well, I'd call that poetic." "She still thinks it's about the money," Nora said softly. "She never understood the currency was respect." Harold nodded. "Patricia's indictment went public an hour ago. Conspiracy to defraud, wire fraud, 3 counts of falsifying trust filings. Her passport's been seized." "Good," Nora said. "She can sit still for once." Back on the porch of her bungalow that afternoon, Nora poured 2 cups of tea. Grace sat next to her in a thick knit scarf, cheeks flushed pink from the cold. "You really gave it away?" Grace asked gently. Nora nodded. "Not all of it, but enough to plant something." "Single mothers?" "Women who were silenced, ignored, replaced." Grace looked down at her tea, her voice quiet. "You could have just held it, kept it, let them watch you glow from a distance." Nora glanced at her. And what would they have learned from that? A beat. Then she added, barely above a whisper, "This was the Christmas gift." Grace leaned against her shoulder. The two of them tucked in like they had nowhere else to be, and no one else to become. The table was simple. Not minimalist or modern. Simple. In the way heirloom china is when it's finally brought out after years in boxes. Linen napkins folded with care. Silver polished by hand. Candles flickering low in glass cylinders along the center like they were guarding the night from noise. The roast sat perfectly browned at the head of the table. Stuffing, sweet potatoes, cranberry compote, all homemade, all intentional. Nora moved through the kitchen in steady steps, wearing a deep burgundy sweater and pearl studs, the same pair she'd once worn to Ethan's engagement dinner. They suited her better here. Grace placed the last set of forks. "How did you make all this?" she asked, turning to Nora with awe. "I had time," Nora replied. "And peace?" Linda arrived with 2 pies and a stack of linen-wrapped gifts under one arm. "Harold's right behind me. He stopped to take a call. I think the DA's office. Something about witness statement." Grace raised an eyebrow. Linda smirked. "Our dear Patricia was convicted on all 3 counts this morning. No bail, no spin, just the cold truth, and a courtroom full of cameras." Nora didn't react much, just smoothed the back of a chair before sitting down. She was always allergic to transparency. Harold entered seconds later, loosening his scarf and shaking off the cold. "Do I smell cinnamon cloves and justice?" Grace laughed. "Take a seat, counselor." They did. All four of them. No pomp, no speeches, just glasses lifted, food passed. The clink of real silver against porcelain. For the first time in years, the Bennett matriarch wasn't being tolerated at a table. She was hosting it. Grace leaned back in her chair after the second round of pie, her cheeks warm from cider and contentment. "This feels like Christmas again," she said softly. Nora met her eyes across the candlelight. "That's because it is. No cameras, no influencers, no whispered corrections or performative praise. Just chosen family. A meal served without obligation. A home not borrowed, but built." The TV hummed softly in the background from the adjoining room. A news report played between commercials. Patricia Hale, former socialite and real estate figure, sentenced to 2 years minimum in federal custody, with further charges pending. Sources confirm multiple victims have come forward citing falsified trust documents and predatory lending practices. No one turned the volume up. No one needed to. Outside, snow began falling in slow, lazy spirals, catching the porch lights in a way that made everything glow. Linda raised her glass once more. "To Nora, for hosting the only dinner this season where the cranberry sauce isn't store-bought or spite-flavored," Grace grinned. "And to Peace? That doesn't ask permission." Harold smiled gently to the clean table. They clinked, softly, like an ending that didn't need fireworks. Later, as the dishes were cleared and the pies packed into foil, Grace lingered by the window, watching the snow dust the empty sidewalk. "Do you think they'll ever try to come back?" she asked quietly. Nora stood behind her, drying her hands on a linen towel. "They might," she said, "but they'll find the door closed, and no one left waiting." Grace nodded, her eyes glinting with something deeper than relief. Not revenge, not even triumph, just peace. Nora turned off the dining room lights one by one, her footsteps soft against the hardwood. As she reached for the last switch, she glanced back at the table, still set, still warm, still full from a meal not meant to impress, only to nourish. She smiled and flipped the light. The envelopes came in thick ivory cardstock, tucked into a worn shoebox stamped Charlotte Roots Foundation. Nora sat at the kitchen table, a teacup to her right, the flame of a vanilla candle to her left. Around her, quiet filled the room like fresh snow. Still, clean, final. Grace sat cross-legged on the floor, holding a letter with trembling hands. "They wrote back," she said, voice hushed, like the words might break if spoken too loud. Nora nodded. "Start with the one from East Charlotte." Grace peeled it open slowly, unfolded the lined stationery, and read. "Dear Ms. Bennett, I'm 27 years old, and I never thought I'd see a college acceptance letter with my name on it, but here it is, because you believed I could. Your scholarship didn't just pay for tuition, it reminded me that I wasn't invisible, that someone somewhere thought I was still worth investing in. I don't know how to repay you, but I'll graduate, and then I'll help someone else. I promise." Grace blinked hard. "Her name's Mariah. She's a single mom of 2, applying for nursing school." Nora folded her hands. "She won't be the last." Another envelope sat beside the candle. Linda picked it up, glasses perched on the tip of her nose. "This one's from a woman in Monroe, a GED student who started night school last fall." She skimmed the opening lines, then exhaled through a quiet smile. "They keep calling you an angel." Nora shook her head. "No wings here, just scars and spreadsheets." The fire in the small hearth crackled beside them. Tea steeped slowly. Pie remnants sat cold but undisturbed. No one felt the urge to rush. Grace reached for her own envelope next, not from a scholarship recipient, but from the university she hadn't dared dream of until Nora handed her the application herself. "You haven't read it aloud yet," Nora said. Grace swallowed. "I've read it 10 times already." "Read it once more," Linda said gently, for her. Grace opened it with fingers that no longer trembled. "Dear Ms. Bennett, we are pleased to inform you of your acceptance into the University of North Carolina's Honors Program, with full academic scholarship awarded through the Carolina Legacy Initiative. Your application essay, titled "The Woman at the Window," moved our committee deeply." She looked up, cheeks flushed. "That's you, Grandma." Nora didn't speak. Her eyes said enough. Grace placed the letter on the table, then took Nora's hand. "I'll go. I'll do the work. I'll make it count." "You already are," Nora said. Outside, the snow had stopped. The lights in the neighborhood flickered on, house by house. but none of them rivaled the glow from Nora's small dining room, a warmth not cast by wealth, but by presence. Linda poured another inch of cider into each mug. You know, she said, watching the steam curl upward, you didn't just win back land, or dignity, or headlines. She looked at Nora directly. You won history. Nora sat back in her chair, letting the words settle, then nodded once. My gift isn't money, she said, her voice low. It's freedom. For Grace. For Mariah. For every woman told her worth expires when she's no longer useful to someone else. She looked at Grace. Really looked. Gone was the child who asked if she was allowed to speak. In her place sat a young woman with eyes full of storm and spark. The true heir. Not to a fortune, but to a fight. You won't just inherit a trust, Nora said. You'll inherit the truth. Grace nodded. And I'll pass it on. In the living room, the fire dimmed to embers, but no one moved to stoke it. They didn't need the heat. Not tonight. Just before midnight, Linda gathered her things, hugged Nora tight, and whispered, I'd follow you into any courtroom or kitchen. Grace walked her to the door, then returned, sliding into the seat beside Nora. They sat in silence, shoulder to shoulder, watching the candle dance its last flickers. The shoebox sat nearby, full of thank yous, of hope, of names who'd never even met Patricia or Claire, but would be freer because of what was undone. Nora looked ahead, eyes distant but dry, and then, finally, softly, she said it. They replaced me once, but by Christmas they came begging for the mother they'd buried, and found she'd already risen,